Welcome to Prime Asset TV, your source for all things pensions. Today, in first of our series, we will be featuring three of Jamaica's most influential leaders in the pensions industry, namely Mr. Herbert Hall, Mr. Joseph M. Matalon, and Mr. Alan Lewis. My name is Ozell Higgins, and I will be your host throughout this program. Herbert Andrew Hall attended Jamaica College between 1943 and 1949. He represented the school in both cricket and football. He was also awarded the Jamaica Scholarship in 1950. Mr. Hall studied law at the Cambridge University in London. He was also employed to Life of Jamaica from 1970 to 1993 and is currently president of Prime Asset Management Limited. He has served his country on several voluntary boards and is currently the president of the Jamaica Association for the Deaf.
When I count back, I'm looking at 45 years of involvement in financial services. Some of it in life insurance, but for the last 20 years, it's been exclusively dealing with pension funds and pension fund management. There are about 900,000 Jamaicans who are employed and who pay their salary, who get paid their salaries by PAYE. Of that 900,000, 90,000, or just exactly 10% of those people, are members of registered pension plans. Is it the people's fault that there is no pension plan for them? I would hesitate to make that judgment. The real reason that there are no pension plans for those people is that no government of this country in the last half a century has ever deemed it necessary to legislate that if you employ people on a permanent basis for years, then you must have in place some arrangement for their retirement. The fact of the matter is that I think in any country, at the state of development that Jamaica is in, must now be prepared to look at legislating the need for employers to put some kind of retirement benefit in place for the people who are there employing for the long term.
Okay.
We have to report to the trustees of the pension plan on a monthly basis, as required by law, to report to the regulators and to the trustees as to how the plan is performing. It will be the same advice that I give to new entrants into any plan that Prime manages. I put that 37 and a half years of contributing service right in front of their face. If you're 23, 24 years old now, if you add 37 and a half years to that, you will be at retirement age, and you have to start thinking about a pension now. Not when you're 40, not when you're 45, but now. When you go to seek employment, as difficult as it may seem, with the shortage of jobs out there, the people coming into the jobs are asking questions of the HR department. Do you provide health insurance for me and my family? Do you provide study leave with pay if I want to advance my education and sharpen my skills in specific areas? They never ask if there's a pension plan. And when they are told that the company happens to have a pension plan, as far as they're concerned, that's not a plus. The pluses are the things they have asked for. Their mind is not on saving for their retirement. But with the 37 and a half years facing you at age 25, that is when you have to start thinking. And if the company does not have a registered pension plan, ask them, if I wish to start an individual retirement plan for myself, will you deduct the monies out of my pay before you take tax so I can start my own savings out of my own funds? But they should ask, because until enough people start to ask this, then the employers will not realize that not having that facility available to their employees could be an inhibiting factor about getting good people into the workplace. The largest employer in this country is our government. Every person who pays taxes pays for the pension of the employees of the largest employer in this country. He ain't paying nothing for his own. His employer ain't paying nothing for him, but he is paying for the million-odd government servants who do not contribute to their own pension for the most part and who are paid out of my and their taxes. Okay. When people get to realize that, you must understand that until they clear up the decisions now being taken for the public sector pension fund, where those people are going to have to start funding their own pension, the workforce outside of government is still sitting back and saying, why are you going to force me to contribute when the biggest employer in the country, who's my government, don't force their people to contribute either. Those things have to be put in place. They have to be put in place by a team of the government and the players. And a second tranche of the pension regulations has now to be begun so that all these new approaches can become law rather than things waiting to happen and hoping that the industry will survive until they are made to happen. I hope that this effort will be beginning in the very, very near future.
Thank you, sir. On that note, thank you very much, sir. Mr. Matalon is currently the chairman of the ICD Group Limited and its subsidiary British Caribbean Insurance Limited. He holds directorships on a number of other boards including the Gleaner Company Limited, Scotia Group Limited, West Indies Home Contractors Limited, Wicon Properties Limited, Prime Asset Management, Matalon Homes Limited, the Tony Thwaites wing of the University Hospital of the West Indies, and National Integrity Action Limited. Mr. Matalon serves as honorary chairman of St. Patrick's Foundation, which supports charitable activities in inner city communities. He's chairman of the board of governors of Hillel Academy in Kingston, Jamaica. Is a member of the Regional Investment Advisory Committee of the University of the West Indies and is a member of the board of the United States-based International Youth Foundation.
First and foremost, the existence of a pension plan is a part of the overall remuneration and benefits package that we offer to employees. I happen to think that it's a very important part of that package. I personally believe that one cannot start too early, putting some resources away against the time when in the future one will not be able to earn an income, and that income becomes absolutely critical. There are so many cases that I have become aware of over the years of individuals who have worked for 30, 40 years, have not seen fit over that time to set aside reserves against their retirement, and who find themselves in a situation where, having provided service for a very long period of time, simply cannot survive as pensioners. And so I think it's on the one hand an important benefit that one can include amongst the menu of benefits in order to attract and retain employees. And then I think, more than that, on a social level and on an economic level within the country, it is important that as a country we ensure that people are setting aside sufficient reserves to tide them through their twilight years. I would certainly recommend to any company with any sizable workforce, 15 or more, that they ought to consider some kind of pension scheme. Now, it does, depending on the type of scheme that you implement, it does impose some administrative and fiduciary burdens on the company, and very often, that is, in my experience, very much a part of the decision not to offer such a scheme. But, short of actually formally setting up your own scheme, I think that it is possible to encourage your staff, to provide them with the education, first of all, about the investment process, and in particular pension saving, and to encourage them to establish their own approved retirement scheme independently. That would be a revolutionary move for Jamaica. I personally would not be uncomfortable with such a proposal at all, because bear in mind, from a sort of sociological perspective, that to the extent that individuals are not required to set aside funds to tide them through their twilight years, very often what will end up happening is that responsibility will ultimately fall to the state. And therefore, we all share in the burden of that equally as taxpayers. So I think that there is some merit to compulsory membership of some form of pension scheme, whether independent or as a part of a company scheme.
Okay.
I do, properly applied, and with the right oversight under those regulations. The fact that company pension schemes, for example, must have elected employee participants in the scheme, represented on the board. Pensioners of the scheme must also be represented on the board of trustees. I think that and a number of other regulatory provisions that govern, for example, the overall approach to investment policy, I think, have provided an environment in which individuals are in a position to have a much greater level of trust in terms of the probability that these funds are going to be properly managed, and that they are going to be able to provide the benefits that they've been promised. But my advice for those who have graduated and who are in the fortunate position where they have acquired a job, My advice to them would be that it is never too early for them to start thinking about the eventuality of their retirement. The sooner they start, the less burdensome the fact of having to put aside this money in the future is going to be. The earlier they start is the greater the sum they're going to be able to build up over time. Obviously, those who have not been able to secure employment don't have an income and therefore are not in a position to set aside. I am hopeful, naturally, that we're going to see a turn in our economy, a return to growth, and a return to growth that is accompanied by significant job creation. So, they may miss out on 1, 2, 3 years of contributions. My advice to them would be, if that is the case, that once they do secure that employment, that they seek to be even more aggressive about what they're putting away for retirement for a period of time to compensate for that period when they were not contributing. Very often schemes allow what they call additional voluntary contributions over and above the standard employer and employee contributions, and I would advise them to take advantage of those provisions. Those are tax relieved or tax deferred savings that they're being allowed to make. And those AVCs can be used ultimately to increase the extent to which your pension is able to replace your income at final salary levels.
Thank you, sir.
Okay? Thank you very much. All right?
Alan Lewis. Mr. Lewis has had a distinguished career in financial services and strategic planning in Jamaica and the United States. His professional career has been underpinned by extensive training and experience in financial risk management. He commenced his career at Life of Jamaica, where he attained the designation Associate of the Society of Actuaries.
The Pension Fund Association of Jamaica is an organization representing broad interests involved in the pension fund industry here in Jamaica. So we represent members of pension funds, we represent sponsors of pension funds, trustees, investment managers and administrators. And our role is to advocate for the interests of our members, of the persons I mentioned earlier. And we do that in a number of ways, particularly in lobbying and discussing with the regulators, that's the FSC, and the government of Jamaica, who sets the policies that govern pension funds, for policies or promulgations that are in the interest, that we think are in the interest of our members. Look like about 26. Tanisha looks like about, looks like about 22. And I would say to you that one day, although you are young today, one day you will be 62, 72, and 82, and less likely to be able to earn the type of funds to sustain your lifestyle. So you have to prepare for that by saving now to build a nest egg that would be sufficient to maintain you and your family members, if at the time, because you may have children and grandchildren, and also to maintain your own health during the period of when your earning income is not as strong as it is now. And that's what the mission of the PFAJ is, primarily to help educate and motivate persons to prepare as early as they can for their retirement years by setting aside their nest egg. The issue of preparing for retirement is more than just pensions, because we need to make it easy for people to save and enter into these plans. So for instance, if it is very difficult for a helper or somebody who is not working in a major company that has human resource departments and other professionals whose jobs are to help their team members to subscribe to these plans, then it becomes much less likely that the persons will subscribe. So one of the things that we should do is to lobby or to support the government in efforts to make it much easier for persons to subscribe, persons who are self-employed or who are informally employed, to subscribe on their own, to be able to enter into arrangements to contribute to the NIS. That's one. But as you discussed earlier, you have to, if you want a big nest egg at retirement, you have to contribute a certain amount, because investment returns will only realistically be so high. And I think we should really expect to put aside 10% of our income for retirement if we want to ensure that we have a suitable nest egg or a sizable nest egg at retirement. I think 10% is a good figure. Sometimes that 10% could be part from the individual and part from the employer, but somehow 10% should go in. If it's less than that, and of course it should be all the time, because a lot of times what happens in Jamaica, or what happens in Jamaica, is persons contribute to a pension plan, they leave the company or they leave that employment, and they take their the funds that have been accumulated at that employer and go and do something else with it. Pay down on a home, children's education, trip abroad, whatever, new TV, whatever it is. But whatever you do with those funds, as long as they are taken away from the purpose of being put aside for retirement, then it's almost as if the person has to start again for their retirement. And that makes it less likely again that they will have enough when the time comes for them when their income no longer is as sizable as it once was. So another thing we should do is stop that practice, prevent persons from having the option of taking their accumulated pension contributions, or make it much more, provide for a penalty if they do take it. Yeah. As soon as you start earning income, set aside 5 to 10% of that income for your pension fund, retirement or your retirement. And you should do that using an individual retirement account if your employer does not have a formal pension plan. Typically, in the old days, there used to be a phrase called a three-legged stool for preparing for your pension plan. And you're preparing for your retirement. One leg of the stool you can assume to be based on the pension plan of your employer. Of course, that assumes that the employer has a pension plan. The second leg of the stool is the contributions to NIS. And the third leg of the stool is your other contributions somewhere else. And that's what was called the three-legged stool. So I think the main point, or the big point of that suggestion, is that don't rely on only one source of savings for your pension plan or for your retirement. So my advice to young people would be to save as much as you possibly can right through your career, and delineate those savings according to type, such as for retirement, saving for the down payment of my home or my car, or an emergency. You should always have an emergency fund. probably a year's salary, 6 months salary, that is put aside, that if you have the fridge broke, conked out, or you had a hurricane and it damaged, minor damage to the home, things that you can't foresee, that you should have that for that purpose. And then, of course, your retirement for that purpose, and then the other things, saving for the down payments on home, for instance. But if you use retirement funds for the home, then you can't expect to have adequate period of retirement. It's those kind of rules that we have to follow. A lot of times we don't save, and then when persons don't save, and then when they reach retirement and they don't have enough funds, they are critical of the state, of the government, for not providing them with a pension. But the fact is that our lives, our own, we have to have individual responsibility. The final thing I would say is, if you help people in your life without the expectation of reward, it is likely that when you need help, you'll get the help from unexpected places.